Hello everyone. My name is Aaqib Javid. I'm a PhD student in Sociology Department at Koç University, Istanbul. Thank you for being here. My talk today looks at how print culture in colonial South Asia, particularly the Urdu magazine Nigār, became a space for debating reason, religion, and belonging. So this research is based on my master's I did at Koç University in the Department of History, and I arrived at this topic based on my archival research in Mahmudabad estate in Lucknow from 2019 to 2020, where I got access to rare Urdu archives and journals magazines from the 19th and 20th century. And my research interests in my master's had been on Islamic modernism, which is this unique timeline in the 18th, 19th century when colonial Muslim reformers and revivalists tried to answer the colonialism's Western embodied rationality. So they saw Islam under attack and they tried to reinterpret Islam in the light of West. And print was a very important medium of modernization in South Asia, and my other interest was partition, which is very traumatic and geographically defining moment in the colonial South Asia. So I explored all these three topics using this magazine Nigār, which was edited by Niyaz Fatehpuri. This is the map of pre-partition India. The areas in yellow were in direct control of British, what was called British India, and the areas in pink were in indirect control and were controlled by local kings. So one figure that kept reappearing again and again in these archives was Niyaz Fatehpuri. He was editor of Nigār. He believed that religion needed reform, not abandonment, to meet the requirements of modern life. Niyaz Fatehpuri was taken in by the decline paradigm, in which he saw enlightenment as a universal and linear historic process, and he said that if Islam is not protected right now, it will face the fate of Christianity in Europe. So he regards religious reforms as the foundation of social renewal in India. For Niyaz, Islam is compatible with modern life. It has to be reinterpreted, and every element which is not compatible has to be removed. He sees ulama as the biggest threat and biggest force responsible for degradation of Islam and its misunderstanding and its stagnation. He calls for a rationalist localized Islam, which is congruent in the Indian conditions and which is primarily an ethical model. He is following naturalists like Sayyid Ahmad Khan, but his political project is completely different from them. So the only thing that remains in Niyaz's understanding of Islam as a project for modern times is Quran. Other than that, he discards everything because those things cannot be understood using reason. And even Quran is something which is seen as a central character of Islam, and it has to be read again in light of reason to match the modern times. So he rejects hadith, he rejects wahi, he rejects ilmul ghaib, he rejects miracles because these things cannot be explained as per reason. In political ideas, he is very much inspired by the times. He's inspired by socialism. He's inspired by Indian nationalism, in particular Nehru, who is calling for the emancipation of poor and the championing the cause of scientific revolution in India, in which religion has to be discarded. And abroad, in other places, Niyaz Fatehpuri is following the case of Iran very closely, and he's very much inspired by Ataturk in Turkey. So for Niyaz, ulama are the primary problem that have to be dealt with, and because they have kept Islam stagnated, and he says there are two approaches to do reforms. The first one is top-down, in which applies to countries where Muslims are in majority. We need a state structure which can dislodge ulama from the place of power, and we can have positivist rational thought running in place of them. That's why he praises Ataturk when he gets to know about reforms in Turkey. He follows some very closely, and he says that they are creating a localized Islam and they are trying to reconcile nationalism and local belonging with religion, which is the best model that should be followed everywhere. But in India, this cannot be done because Muslims are a minority and they need a bottom-up approach. So he creates this magazine Nigār, which becomes a carrier of his ideas. In the first 5, 6, 7 years, he tries to stay away from religion, but in the 8th year, 1930s, he gets drawn to it because he reached the conclusion that for any reform to happen, you have to talk about religion in South Asia. So he comes with this magazine titled Nigār with the aim of reforming the Qawm meaning the Muslim community in India. So his audience is newly formed Urdu elite because when Britishers came, they dislodged Persian as a language of high power and Urdu was promoted. And there was a booming print industry in the early 1920s which benefited from the Caliphate movement, which launched nationalist leaders like Gandhi, made them prominent names in India. So in his magazine, Nigār, we have this, the structure goes like, there's an introductory mulahizat in which author talks about what's happening around the country, what's going to happen in the magazine, what they're going to talk about, not talk about. There are essays based on history, religion, there are stories, there is literary criticism. Nigār is one of the best pieces of literary criticism for the Urdu literature for the times. And there are translations of European literature, particularly French. But what makes this magazine stand out is that it has a question-answer section, dedicated question-answer section in which the editor takes questions from its readers on all topics, mostly religion, and tries to answer them. It's not acting alone, it's acting with other Urdu magazines which are its competition, Aaqib, Humayun, Marif, Semona, Shabistan, etc. So this magazine runs from 1922 to 1964 under the editorship of Niyaz Fatehpuri and almost never misses an edition. So I'm going to talk about two important events in 1930s which I try to understand using this magazine. The first one is how interpersonal ulama rivalries shaped print culture and understanding of religion. So the first thing among them is Fatwa-e-Kufr, which is the Sacrilege Act, which is under which Niyaz Fatehpuri is booked for his writings. But the deep down cause for why he is booked for this act is his rivalry with the fellow magazine, which is run by another alim, another scholar named Majid Daryabadi. So Majid Daryabadi makes his mission to gather scholars around and try to book Niyaz Fatehpuri for his views on religion, for his sacrilege, and they fail, but they get to Niyaz to make an apology. And for Niyaz it's a very personal act because he says, I'm not booked here for religion, I'm here booked because for my magazine, for my views, and these people cannot answer me in light of reason. That's why they're using government and popular support from masses to attack me. So a year passes by, and in 1931 we see pamphlets all of a sudden showing up in Lucknow in which a woman accuses this fellow editor, this scholar, of luring her into marriage, promising her marriage and marrying her and then discarding her after 6 months. So she detests this, saying, this is the condition of our alims. Niyaz Fatehpuri is behind this sensationalization, and he makes it a prime subject of his newspaper, and he talks about religion. He says this is not Islam, and these people are giving such a bad name to our religion. They are justifying their stance, their lust and their power under the garb of Islam. And he uses prophetic examples and tries to recast and no, this has never been the case. Prophet never married for these reasons. They had different roles, different conditions, and these ulamas, they shouldn't be the moral leaders of society. That's when he said, this is the whole aim of my project. Like, stop worshipping these people. They are themselves using religion as a garb to maintain power. And in doing such a thing, he receives support from across the board by other magazines just because they have similar political stances. Another issue I wanted to highlight in this presentation was 1935. 1935 in political term, like we see in Prince Affair after 1935, there is a politicization, a growing politicization that happens across. Because in 1935, we have the passage of Government of India Act, which promises more reforms, more control for the local Indian masses, and autonomy in the regional provinces. So 1937 elections are held by this act, according to this act, and the Congress party, led by Nehru, they overwhelmingly win 8 out of 11 provinces, and they get a chance to promote their program, to test their policies in these small regions. And that's where we see the rise of Muslim League and Muslim separatism in India, because the policies that are enacted, they go in direct disenfranchisement of Muslim masses, particularly in the United Provinces. So the first issue that happens is the language reforms. They're trying to make a uniform standardized language in which Hindi and Urdu are combined, but Persian and Arabic words are purged, and there's more emphasis on Sanskrit words. In a similar way, a uniform education scheme known as Varda scheme is promoted by Gandhi, but they draw symbols from the Hindu past. And Niyaz is furious, and his readers are also furious. They're like, look, you are justifying Congress party, look what they are doing. They are against Muslims. So for Niyaz, this is unacceptable. He says that, he tries to justify it, but eventually fails, saying that, okay, this is Gandhi. He is a dictator. He's a capitalist. The good guy, Nehru and Bose, they're powerless, We have to give them more power. He asked Muslims to join them more, and not. He vehemently opposes the Muslim League led by Jinnah. He says these are landed class people, aristocrats. They don't care about Muslim masses, and he says this is the biggest disaster happening on Indian Muslims, the formation of Muslim League, because it is mobilizing people on the basis of religion, and it's generating extraterritorial loyalties, and it sits completely against his project of this making religion a bit lighter, like rationalizing it with local tradition and making it more modern, making it more rational. His only answer is that Muslims should join the Congress. But there's a popular dissent, as can be seen in the notes. Then letters he receives from his readers, his dedicated base, questioning his stance, saying that no, you are being illogical, irrational. In the end, partition happens, and Niyaz Fatehpuri, despite being vehemently against Jinnah and Pakistan movement, shifts to Pakistan. So the closing reflections from a short chat, primarily that Islamic modernization in South Asia should not be seen as a linear process. It was a multifaceted and complex process. The colonialism and the idea of West had disturbed the psyche of Indian Muslims. Print was one of the very important mediums of dissemination of ideas and modernization. And these reformers and reform ideas should not be read in isolation. They were connected with the wider world. Niyaz Fatehpuri was not appropriating naturalists completely. He had a different position for different things, for politics, for the question of women. They had to be reconciled with the Indian question. And although popular, there was no uniform Muslim response to Pakistan movement. It was with 1937 elections and Congress ministries that made Muslim League and Pakistan movement immensely popular. So my current work in my doctoral research is based on, it's widening from my MA thesis. It tries to understand how translation Islamic movements in 1970s responded to a deepening crisis of meaning produced by the failure of post-independence modernization in the Muslim world. Thank you so much for your time and joining.